Commander Vex-Nal of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet adjusted his 3 eyes with practiced irritation as another false alarm screeched through the monitoring station. The massive orbital platform, designated Sentinel Prime, had been watching the empty sectors of space for 17 rotations, without so much as a cosmic dust particle worth reporting. "Sir, we're picking up another anomaly in Sector 779, announced Lieutenant Chris Vole, her tentacles dancing across the holographic interface with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned that anomalies were usually just solar flares having bad days. "Let me guess," Vex-Nal replied, his mandibles clicking with barely contained sarcasm. "Another mysterious energy signature that turns out to be a dying star's last burp. Actually, sir, this one's different. The readings are, well, they're impossible." That got his attention. In 40 years of service, Vex-Nal had learned that impossible usually meant interesting, and interesting usually meant dangerous. He slithered over to the main console, his serpentine lower half coiling around the observation deck's central platform. The holographic display showed a section of space that should have been emptier than a politician's promise. But there, blinking like an angry eye, was an energy signature that made absolutely no sense according to every law of physics the Galactic Alliance had spent centuries documenting. "Run a diagnostic on the sensors," Vex-Nal ordered, though his gut was already telling him the equipment was working perfectly. "And contact Admiral Thex-Mar immediately." "Already tried, sir. Communications are down across the entire sector. It's like something is jamming every frequency we know." Before Vex-Nal could respond, the impossible energy signature vanished, not gradually, not with the typical decay pattern of a natural phenomenon, but instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch and decided that physics could take a holiday. "Well, that's not ominous at all," he muttered, his scales rippling with unease. 3 hours later, Admiral Thex-Mar arrived aboard the command vessel Eternal Vigilance, and she was not in a good mood. The 7-foot-tall Kyrian warrior diplomat had been pulled from a crucial negotiation with the Helix Confederation, and her forearms were crossed in the universal gesture of someone who wanted answers, preferably accompanied by the heads of whoever had wasted her time. "Commander Vex-Nal," she growled, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally negotiated peace treaties while simultaneously winning 3 different wars. "Explain to me why I've abandoned delicate diplomatic proceedings to investigate what my science team tells me is quite literally nothing. With respect, Admiral, nothing doesn't jam communications across 17 sectors and then disappear like it was never there." Thex-Mar's compound eyes focused on the data streaming across the displays. Her expression shifted from irritation to the kind of thoughtful concern that made seasoned officers check their life insurance policies. "But have you tried long-range scans of the surrounding systems?" "That's the problem, sir. Our scans are coming back with readings that don't make sense. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies in systems that should be empty. They see electromagnetic signatures that suggest industrial activity on scales that would require entire civilizations. And quantum disturbances that shouldn't be possible without technology that makes our most advanced ships look like stone tools. And all of this appeared how recently? 6 hours ago, Admiral. All at once, across a region of space roughly 300 light-years in diameter." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft humming of the ship's systems and the occasional nervous click of mandibles. Everyone present understood the implications, though nobody wanted to be the first to voice them. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Yeltra, her voice tight with barely controlled panic, "we're receiving a transmission." "From where?" "That's just the thing, Admiral. It's not coming from any single point. The signal is originating from everywhere at once, as if the entire affected region has become one massive transmitter." Thex-Mar straightened to her full imposing height. "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a sound that chilled the ichor in every crew member's veins. It was laughter. Gah, not the pleasant laughter of shared jokes or the nervous laughter of those facing the unknown, but the kind of laughter that belonged to someone who had just realized they held all the cards in a game nobody else knew they were playing. "Greetings, observers," came a voice that sounded disturbingly familiar yet utterly alien. "We appreciate your dedicated surveillance of our little corner of the galaxy. Such diligence deserves recognition. This is Admiral Thex-Mar of the Galactic Alliance Defense Fleet. Identify yourself and state your intentions." "Oh, Admiral, such formality. We know exactly who you are. We've been watching you watch us for quite some time now. The irony is delicious, don't you think?" Vex-Nal felt his scales stand on end. Something about the voice triggered recognition patterns in his brain that shouldn't exist. It was as if he was hearing someone he'd known his entire life, despite never having encountered this entity before. "You want to know what's truly amusing?" The voice continued, and now other crew members were shifting uncomfortably as they too felt the uncanny familiarity. "For decades, your species have been so concerned about what might be out there in the dark between the stars. You've built fleets, established monitoring stations, created elaborate defense networks, all to protect yourselves from the unknown threats that might emerge from the void." The transmission paused, and in that silence, every sensor on the ship began registering impossible readings. Space itself seemed to be rewriting its own rules in real time. "But you never considered the possibility that we were already here. Not hiding, not sneaking, not plotting in some distant corner of the universe. We've been right here, among you, learning from you, growing because of you." "That's impossible," Thex-Mar stated flatly. "Our sensors would have detected any unknown civilization capable of this level of technological manipulation. Would they? Tell me, Admiral, when you look at your crew, do you see every individual clearly, or do you see what you expect to see?" As if responding to some unspoken command, every display screen on the bridge flickered and changed. Instead of sensor readings and star charts, they now showed recordings of Sentinel Prime, the Eternal Vigilance, and dozens of other Alliance installations and vessels. But these weren't external recordings. These were internal security feeds, command deck surveillance, personal quarters, private meetings between high-ranking officials. The recordings stretched back years, showing conversations that should have been impossible for any outside entity to observe. "Impressive surveillance network you've built," the voice commented with obvious amusement. "So many eyes watching the darkness, so many ears listening for threats. It really did make our job remarkably easy." "Our job?" Thex-Mar's 4 hands were now reaching for weapons that wouldn't help against an enemy that seemed to exist in the spaces between reality. "Integration, Admiral. Study. Understanding. You see, we are what you might call collaborative learners. We don't conquer in the traditional sense. We don't destroy or subjugate. We observe, we adapt, we become. And thanks to your incredibly detailed surveillance of everything you consider important, we've had front-row seats to the greatest educational experience in galactic history." The screens shifted again, now showing technical schematics of Alliance ships, weapon systems, communication networks, and defense strategies. Information that should have been stored in the most secure databases in Alliance space, protected by quantum encryption and isolated from any external access. "The beautiful thing about Watchers," the voice continued, "is that they tend to focus so intently on what they're watching that they forget to look behind them." "What do you want?" Vex-Nal demanded, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to maintain some semblance of authority in a situation that had moved far beyond his training. "Want? Oh, Commander, we don't want anything. We already have everything we need. Your technologies, your strategies, your cultural patterns, your individual psychological profiles, your deepest fears and greatest strengths. We've been downloading your entire civilization piece by piece, and you've been helping us do it." The holographic displays throughout the ship began showing a 3-dimensional map of Alliance space. Every system, every colony, every military installation, every trade route. But overlaid on this familiar map was something new. Something that made even the most experienced officers feel their confidence evaporating like water in vacuum. Surrounding every Alliance position, sometimes occupying the same coordinates, were markers indicating unknown installations, thousands of them. The map suggested that for every Alliance facility, there were 3 or 4 unknown counterparts in exactly the same locations. You've been sharing your space with us for longer than your current governments have existed. The voice explained with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. We simply learn to exist in the spaces you don't pay attention to. The gaps between sensor sweeps, the blind spots in your surveillance networks, the brief moments when your attention shifts from one task to another. We've built an entire civilization in your oversight. Admiral Thex-Mar was frantically signaling her communications officer, but Yel-Tra was shaking her head helplessly. Every system they tried to access was either non-responsive or displaying information that contradicted their understanding of reality. The truly magnificent part, the voice continued, is that we didn't need to hide our technology from you. We simply needed to hide our existence. Your sensors detected our energy signatures constantly, but your computers categorized them as natural phenomena. Your communications networks carried our data streams alongside your own, but your analysis programs filtered them out as noise. We've been having conversations through your own systems for decades. This is impossible, Thex-Mar repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. The evidence was literally surrounding them, displayed on screens that shouldn't be able to show information they didn't possess. Impossible? Admiral, your species created faster than light travel by convincing space that distance was negotiable. You developed artificial gravity by politely asking the universe to ignore its own rules in small, localized areas. You communicate across galactic distances by sending information through dimensions that technically don't exist. And you consider our approach impossible? Buzzin'. The screens flickered once more, and now they showed something that made every crew member's respective circulatory systems freeze in their vessels. Live feeds from Alliance installations across the galaxy. But in these feeds, the familiar personnel were working alongside individuals that weren't in any Alliance database. Beings that looked almost right, almost familiar, but with subtle differences that marked them as definitely not Alliance citizens. They were operating Alliance equipment, accessing Alliance systems, participating in Alliance meetings, and nobody in the recordings seemed to notice anything unusual. We prefer to think of it as collaborative evolution, the voice said, and now there was something in its tone that suggested the friendly explanation phase of this encounter was drawing to a close. Your species has such wonderful qualities: innovation, curiosity, the ability to adapt to impossible circumstances. We've learned so much from you. And now? Vex-Nal asked, though he was increasingly certain he didn't want to hear the answer. Now, Commander, comes the practical application phase. We've spent all this time learning to be like you. It's time to see how well you can learn to be like us. Meow. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence that felt heavier than the vacuum of space. For several long moments nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed to breathe. Then every screen on the ship went dark, and when they came back online, they were showing something that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their considerably shortened lives. The displays now showed the bridge they were standing on, from multiple angles, with perfect clarity. But in these recordings, half the crew were beings that nobody recognized, beings that had apparently been working alongside them for years without anyone noticing. And as the crew turned to look at each other with growing horror, they began to realize that some of their colleagues were looking back at them with expressions of polite confusion, as if they couldn't understand why everyone seemed so upset about finally meeting the neighbors. Lieutenant Chris Vol was the first to break the paralyzed silence that had gripped the bridge. Her tentacles were trembling as she pointed at her console operator, a Helix engineer named Morketh, who had served alongside her for 3 years. Morketh, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the ship's humming systems. When did you join this crew? Morketh tilted his crystalline head with what appeared to be genuine confusion. What kind of question is that, Chris? We graduated from the academy together, remember? You helped me pass xenobiology. I helped you with quantum mechanics. We've been friends since. He paused, his luminescent eyes flickering, as if accessing a memory that wasn't quite fitting properly into place. Since he tried again, then stopped entirely, his expression shifting to something that might have been mild surprise. That's interesting. I can't seem to recall the exact moment we met. How peculiar. Admiral Thex-Mar was running tactical assessments through her 4 separate cognitive processors, ability that had made her legendary in military circles. Right now, all 4 processors were returning the same terrifying conclusion. They were completely outmatched by an enemy they had never seen coming. "Everyone remain calm," she announced, though her own voice suggested she was having difficulty following her own advice. "We need to establish who among us is original." "Oh, that's simple enough," came the amused voice from the speakers, apparently enjoying the show, "though I think you'll find the answer more complicated than you're expecting." The screens shifted again, displaying what appeared to be personnel files for every crew member aboard the Eternal Vigilance. But these weren't the files from Alliance databases. These were impossibly detailed psychological profiles, complete with behavioral patterns, decision-making algorithms, emotional responses, and something labeled as integration compatibility ratings. "You see," the voice continued conversationally, "the question isn't who among you is original. The question is whether any of you remember being anything else." Commander Vex-Nal felt something cold crawling up his spine as he stared at his own profile. According to the data, he had been optimized for leadership scenarios and had undergone seamless personality integration approximately 6 months ago. The file included recordings of conversations he remembered having, but from perspectives he had never experienced. "This is a psychological warfare technique," Thex-Mar declared, though she was staring at her own file with growing unease. "You're trying to make us doubt our own identities." "Am I?" "Tell me, Admiral, do you remember your first kiss?" The question came out of nowhere, completely unrelated to their tactical situation, but Thex-Mar found herself automatically accessing the memory. It had been with a young Kyrian named. The memory was there, crystal clear in every detail except for the face and name of her partner. She could remember the location, the circumstances, the emotions, even what she had been wearing. But the other person in the memory was a blank space shaped like someone important. "Fascinating, isn't it?" the voice asked. "How many of your most precious memories feature people you can no longer quite recall? How many crucial moments in your lives revolve around individuals who seem to have been edited out?" Around the bridge, crew members were having the same realization. Personal histories that felt complete were revealing themselves to be full of person-shaped holes, relationships that had been important enough to shape their lives but somehow too vague to describe. "The beautiful thing about memory," the voice explained, "is how cooperative it is with revision. Change a few key details, adjust some emotional associations, and the mind fills in the gaps with whatever makes the most sense. We've been your friends, your mentors, your lovers, your rivals. We've been there for every crucial moment in your development, guiding you, learning from you, becoming you." Lieutenant Yeltra was frantically working at her communication station, trying to establish contact with other Alliance vessels. "Sir, I'm getting responses from other ships, but something's wrong. They're all reporting the same situation. Crew members who don't quite add up, memories that don't quite fit, and..." She paused, her face turning a shade that indicated severe distress in her species. "And what, Lieutenant?" "They're reporting that their human advisors are behaving strangely." This got everyone's attention. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, barely 50 years since first contact, but they had quickly become valued for their unique problem-solving abilities and their talent for finding unconventional solutions to impossible situations. "Define strangely," Thex-Mar ordered. "They're laughing, sir. All of them. Every human on every ship in the fleet is laughing. And when asked why, they just say you're about to find out." The voice from the speakers chuckled, and for the first time there was something different in its tone. Something that sounded almost nervous. "Ah yes, the humans. We really should have paid more attention to the humans." "What do you mean?" Vex-Nal demanded. "Well, you see, when we began our integration project, we focused on the established civilizations. The Kyrians with their military precision, the Zephyrians with their analytical minds, the Helix with their technological innovations. Species that had been part of galactic civilization for millennia, with predictable patterns and well-documented behaviors." The screens began showing star charts highlighting human colonies and installations throughout Alliance space. But humans were new. chaotic, unpredictable. They hadn't been shaped by centuries of galactic civilization, so their patterns were difficult to categorize. We decided to leave them for later. After we had established control over the more significant species, that was a mistake. Came a new voice over the communications system. This one was definitely human, carrying the distinctive accent of Earth's North American continent. "Who is this?" Thex-Mar barked. "Captain Sarah Martinez, aboard the human vessel Indomitable. And I've got some good news and some bad news for our mysterious friends. The humans are compromised too," Vex-Nal said flatly. "This is obviously another psychological manipulation." "Oh, I'm definitely compromised," Martinez agreed cheerfully, "but not in the way our new friends expected. See, the thing about humans is that we're really good at pretending to be something we're not. We call it acting. Lying, espionage, politics, dating. We've turned deception into an art form." The alien voice cut in, and now it definitely sounded concerned. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying that when you tried to replace us, study us, integrate with us, you ran into a problem. Humans don't have consistent behavioral patterns. We contradict ourselves constantly. We act irrationally, make decisions based on emotions, change our minds for no apparent reason, and somehow still manage to function as a civilization." "Your point?" the alien voice asked, though it was clear they already suspected where this was going. "My point is that when you tried to copy us, you couldn't. So you did the next best thing. You tried to influence us, guide us, shape us into something more predictable. But here's what you didn't understand about humans. We're paranoid as hell." More human voices began joining the conversation, from ships throughout the fleet. "Captain James Wong here. We've been watching you watch us since day one," Commander Lisa Okafor reporting. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice when our psychological profiles started making sense? This is Colonel Mike Thompson. Seriously, trying to make humans more logical? That was your first red flag right there." The alien voice was silent for several long moments. When it returned, the amusement was completely gone. "You knew." "You knew. We suspected," Martinez corrected. "Humans have been dealing with infiltration, replacement, and psychological manipulation since before we left our home planet. Cause of las auster. Lucky Omar. Gil, command. We've written thousands of stories about exactly this scenario. When we joined the Alliance and started working alongside species that were suddenly interested in studying our unique thought patterns, we got suspicious. But you did nothing to interfere with our operations." "Oh, we did plenty. We just did it the human way. We fed you false information, acted out behaviors that seemed random but were actually carefully planned, and most importantly, we started watching you back." The screens throughout the bridge suddenly changed, showing a completely different view of recent events. This time, the recording showed human personnel on various ships and installations, apparently having quiet conversations with their non-human colleagues. But in these recordings, the humans were clearly aware they were being observed and were deliberately feeding specific information to their watchers. "Every time one of your people tried to study us," Wong's voice continued, "we studied them right back. Every time you thought you were learning our behavioral patterns, we were actually teaching you false patterns. Every time you tried to predict our responses to situations, we were deliberately responding in ways that would give you incorrect data about human psychology. The best part," added Okafor, "is that you kept assuming we were just naturally chaotic. You never considered that the chaos might be intentional." Vex-Nal was staring at the displays in fascination and growing hope. "You were conducting a counterintelligence operation. For 50 years, Martinez confirmed. We've been feeding your people false information about human capabilities, human psychology, human technology, and human intentions. Everything you think you know about us is wrong." "But why?" the alien voice asked, and now there was something almost like pleading in its tone. "Because," Thompson replied, "we figured that any species capable of infiltrating galactic civilization without being detected was probably dangerous. And the one thing humans are really good at is dealing with dangerous unknowns. You wanted to learn about us through observation and integration," Martinez added. We wanted to learn about you through misdirection and manipulation. Guess which approach worked better? The screens shifted once more, and this time they showed something that made even Admiral Thex-Mar's multiple hearts skip synchronized beats. Human installations throughout Alliance space were revealing additional structures that had been hidden from all previous scans. Not one or two hidden facilities, but hundreds. Entire fleets of ships that had been operating under sophisticated stealth technology. Research stations that existed in dimensions parallel to normal space, and what appeared to be a communications network that connected every human presence in the galaxy. Meet the real human contribution to the Galactic Alliance, Martinez announced. While you were busy studying everyone else, we were building a civilization specifically designed to deal with threats exactly like you. Every human you thought you were observing, Wong continued, was actually reporting back to a command structure you never detected. Every behavior pattern you thought you had figured out was actually a carefully constructed performance designed to keep you interested while revealing nothing useful. And every time you tried to replace one of us or influence one of us, Okafor added, we learned a little bit more about your capabilities, your technology, and your true intentions. The alien voice was quiet for so long that the bridge crew began to wonder if the connection had been severed. When it finally returned, it carried a tone of something that might have been respect, mixed with considerable apprehension. What do you want? That's the beautiful thing. Martinez replied, we don't want anything from you. We want something for you. Explain. Explain, you've spent decades learning to be like us, studying our civilizations, integrating with our cultures. You've become part of what we are. The question is, what happens now? We could expose you, Thompson pointed out, reveal your infiltration to the Alliance, turn this into a shooting war, hunt down every one of your people and eliminate them. But that would be wasteful. Wong added, you've already proven you can coexist with us. You've been doing it for years. You've contributed to our societies, helped with our problems, even made friends among us. What we want, Martinez concluded, is for you to stop hiding, join the Alliance officially, contribute openly, help us build something better than what any of our species could create alone. And if we refuse? The human voices answered in unison, and their tone carried the promise of species that had survived ice ages, world wars, and their own worst impulses. Then you'll discover that everything you learned about human warfare was also deliberately misleading. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough for everyone present to contemplate the implications. Then, from speakers throughout the ship, came something that sounded like a sigh. We accept your terms. Though I suspect this partnership is going to be far more complicated than any of us anticipated. Complicated is what humans do best, Martinez replied cheerfully. Welcome to the real Galactic Alliance. As communication channels opened across the fleet and throughout Alliance space, species that had been secretly coexisting for decades began the process of official introduction. And as the universe prepared to witness the birth of a truly integrated galactic civilization, one thought occurred to every being involved. The humans had been planning this from the very beginning, and that was either the most terrifying or the most hopeful realization in galactic history. Possibly both.